I've never missed these meetings.
We didn't give Bob the same
microphone.
Yeah, well, you guys are up here at 7 in the morning. I'll probably sit down.
And they're public meetings, so you can still come. Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming to the first meeting of the 2024 CIP. We'll go ahead and get started. A couple members, Joe Cubitt's out of town. I know a couple others might drift in, but oh yeah, thanks, Adam. So just a reminder, we are recording as well. All right, so, oh, I hear someone else coming in.
The only other reminder I would make is that we do have to stick to a timeline of 7 to 8 because the police subcommittee meets right after us.
Morning, Paul. All right, so we will jump in and start with DPW. Got both generations here to talk to us about this.
Sure. So we'll have Bob and Sam have submitted their first draft of the updates to the CIP. We hope to, by the end of the CIP process, be moving away from the Excel spreadsheet to the budget software CIP, but still a little up in the air as to what that's going to look like. The transition to the budget software is taking a bit longer than anticipated. So we'll start with this, see where it goes as we go through our process. Met with Bob and Sam yesterday. We highlighted all the changes in red, so we'll turn it over to them to walk through, at least to sort of hit the high points initially, and then we can jump into discussion about different things.
Okay, one of the first changes that we made, we had under Public Works, the Highway Department, we had an asset management plan for Public Works equipment. We moved that from 26 to 28, mainly because we want to get established with the buildings, facilities, software first, and then go from there. Then, let's see. Yeah, one of the other changes is on the zero-turn mower. We increased that to 18,000. I believe that was what, 12, I think, before. And then we decreased the grader and moved it out from 27 to 29. Lowered that down. Prices seem to be coming back a little bit more controllable on equipment. That's basically a placeholder right now. The grader we have is fine. We have less dirt roads. So we're hoping that that'll hold on, but one never knows with parts. Things could change at the blink of an eye. Right now the grader's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. We pretty much keep up with it, but we just ran into an issue with our excavator where we couldn't get parts for that, and that's a 2007, so that just gives you an idea. We ended up having to replace the whole motor because we couldn't get a certain part. So we just never know with the supply chain issues lately. The next thing would be the fire generator. We moved that from 26 to 28, and again, that's just a placeholder. Lou Botta's actually helping us work on trying to get a grant. Hopefully we'll be able to do that, and this thing will be taken right off the list. That's our plan, but things are kind of being put on hold because, well, the fire station, for one, they're talking about maybe putting an addition, and I know they're talking about work here, so we're not sure what size generator will be needed here. One will still probably be needed. We're thinking it might be able to be sized smaller. And then moving to Public Works sewer, or actually, no, I jumped over here, excuse me. Roll-off truck, I had that in there, and we pushed that out. And a roll-off truck is actually more for the transfer station, but we figured it could be a multi-purpose tool for highway as well. And we pushed that out to 2031 from 2025. We did try to get that, but I pulled it last year, because decided we're not really ready for that. Okay, moving to sewer.
Bob, did you hit the town office furnace? Did you hit the striking of the furnace?
Oh, no, I didn't. The town furnace, actually, we pulled that one completely, because we're working on, we found out it's a lot cheaper. I've been getting prices, but it's also been bothering at the town office, so we're probably gonna have to replace it like before winter. So that is taken off this list.
As a town office dweller, I can tell you we operated on space heaters most of last winter.
Yeah, it's been, once again, parts. Let's see, going to sewer, 2026, we had slip line and manhole rehabilitation, which we pushed out 1 year to 27. And again, 28 to 2030. Let's see. The Georges Mills wastewater grinder motor, or actually it's, yeah. That there, we've been looking at that, and that's, we decided it'd be best to move that up a little bit closer to the future. So we went from 2031 to 2029 on that, and held the price the same, because we have found that the prices are not actually gone down on that. And I believe the last thing we looked at was, oh no, that's it, I think. Yeah. One thing I wanted to bring up is looking to the future. One of the things we're looking at getting this year is a new backhoe. We're finding lots of wear in the pins and stuff like that. We pushed it out probably about as long as we dare at this point. We're concerned it's going to start costing some serious money. And the other thing that isn't in here, Sam's going to work on, just so we have it for the future. We're probably going to have to add another sidewalk machine, the way everybody wants more sidewalks in town, so we figure we probably ought to step up and have something in there, so he's going to work on getting prices for that. Other than that, I think, did I miss anything, Sam?
No.
Any questions?
Generally speaking, what's the basis for these numbers? Meaning, is it an estimate, best guess? I know what today's price is, and then I think about it's out 5 years, and then there's some X factor of inflation that I add to that. Give me a sense on how you determine each of the numbers.
Normally what we'll do is get prices, and then today's price, and then
Yep.
we'll usually go like a 10% figure, but keep in mind too, these prices, they don't actually show you that, there's more than just the equipment we get. We've got to maybe put lights on them, put a radio in them. The grader, for instance, if we replace that, we're going to need a shelving wing, because the grader isn't just used for dirt roads, it's also used for pushing back snow in the winter, getting snow off the roads before spring for mud season. So almost every piece of equipment we have to put lights and radios, so that kind of changes the price a little bit from what you'd see, but also we put a price in there, because at any moment it could go away, I guess, but we'll put a price in there like anybody would have to purchase this at that price. Most of our stuff, you can get municipal pricing or state bid pricing, so the price will actually come down lower. That amount, we may not actually spend it. It's hard for us to pinpoint exactly where that's going to be. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, it does. These numbers do not reflect the resale of an asset. I believe that money goes into the general fund when that happens.
Correct.
So there is some asset value when we dispose of it, and it depends on the condition, type of equipment, demand, et cetera. But that's where those monies go. They're not in this projection. What about sidewalk repair as a part, particularly on the Main Street project? Does that lie anywhere in your budget or projection?
I thought that was in here.
Because I guess where I'm coming from is I think, the project's going really well, but there's going to be a lot of need for repair that I think falls to the town and not to the contractor. And is that here? And I didn't see it if it is.
I think what it
There's-
is that the first one has the sidewalks on Main Street, Seamans to Cleveland, and then we probably should have added the Main Street to
Correct.
all of the rest of them. Those are just the sections of Main Street sidewalks, so then from
Yeah.
Cougar to Pleasant. And so it's in here, we just need to make that more clear.
Yeah.
And it's listed as improvements, not repairs, I guess, because like I have, the first one is sidewalk improvements on Main Street, Seamans Road to Cleveland's.
Yep.
So that would be this section here, pretty much going by, from Seamans Road all the way out towards the Catholic Church.
So since we're only reflecting expense in 2026, does that mean that the sidewalks will remain in the condition left by the contractor until that year?
We have to wait a year. They've got that bonded.
Yep.
So, and it could change too, because they bond it for a year. If anything settles, whatever happens, they're responsible for it. They got to come back and repair it. And the other issue is if they have a water break, if something malfunctions that they put in, they're responsible for that. So what I'm hearing is if we touch anything, pretty much the warranty is null and void.
Yep.
So we're just stepping back until, and I think it's a good idea anyway, because if they disturb anything near the sidewalk, you kind of want that to settle out and make sure that
Yeah.
things are where they're supposed to be. It usually takes a while for the dirt to pack back down, a good year anyway. So it's definitely worth stepping back and letting it settle.
Okay. My last question is, talk to us about new versus used or leased equipment. The aggregate budget for capital is significant, and it'll compete against other things in the town budget. And when you weigh that decision, what's the pros and cons of, do we need it new? Is there any value in looking at used if a piece of equipment comes out of a lease company that's looking to sell an asset? Do we track that? Do we look at that? Or third, do we think about lease versus buy? And I know there are trade-offs, and talk a little bit about how you think about that.
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up, Charlie, because one of the things I looked in it, and it isn't going to be on this round of trucks because we already have them all ordered and it's taken forever to get them, but one of the things that I did was talk to the dealership that we currently go through. What is the plan on, what do they have for some sort of a lease? And a lot of them are going with like a 7-year lease, which actually isn't a bad thing on trucks because you can get a 7-year warranty. So it's it can drop that maintenance down a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's something Sam will probably the next go around. It's going to be a while because our trucks, we pretty much updated the fleet right now. That's on the full-size trucks. I'm not sure on the smaller ones what they offer. I do know that the pickup I'm running, the extended warranty was ridiculous. It was a lot of money, not even worth it. On the large trucks, don't ask me why, it was only like $1,200. Obviously, it was a no-brainer to go with it. So we're good for 7 years when we purchase a truck. As far as used equipment, I look at it, you know, I don't like buying for myself somebody else's headaches. If it's something that has very little mileage on it, that's a little different scenario. We did try on our first sidewalk machine to buy a demo, and it turned out that that probably wasn't the best choice I made. It's had a lot of issues that we've had to try to figure out. The thing's been broke down probably 3-4 times when you need it, and that's not an ideal scenario for us. But it's definitely not out of the question as far as certain pieces of equipment. I do know the grader that we own, that actually was a used piece of equipment. Before, I was just, I don't even think I was a foreman then. I might have been a laborer, but we purchased that used, and that's probably one of the best purchases that I've seen come through the door. Sometimes you can make out pretty good.
So that type of opportunity we look at versus we're set to buy something brand new.
Yeah, if
And
the
that's-
opportunity's there, we do look at it.
Okay.
Sometimes the prices aren't as good as what you'd hope. It's only a few $1,000s difference, so it's like, okay, do I buy the brand new one and get a better warranty? So you gotta kind of weigh it out and figure out which is the best direction to head. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
I think we've gone over this before, but every year, you know, it becomes confusing. You talked about the grant for I think the generator.
Yep.
Obviously, that's still a cost. Whose budget does it hit, or does it just drop to the bottom line? Or, in other words, you have a cost in there, which is going to be incurred. Does it matter how it's funded?
Usually the cost is, if you get the right grant, most of the time, there isn't really a lot of cost to it, but it would go through my budget.
Okay, so it wouldn't, if you got the grant, it wouldn't drop out. It would just be a separate
Correct.
funding thing.
Correct. On the revenue side, instead of coming through by tax dollars raised, it comes through in the grants and gifts. Is that right, Budget Committee people? You know this better than I do, but and just as a different place of where the money starts, but it stays in the same spot on the actual budget side.
One more quick thing, which I think probably goes to the future, but when we're talking about a lease, obviously the interest rate component that's in that is not tax-free. Is there any municipal funding, or are other towns actually financing these themselves so that they can get the reduction by the tax-free interest?
I'm actually not sure how towns are doing it, as far as the finance end of it. The only thing I've talked to different towns about, like town of Croydon, as far as what they were doing, and that was the 7-year lease, but part of that was they had to trade the truck in at the end of the year. Or,
In the 7 years, you mean?
yeah, at the end of the 7 years, they'd trade that in and start all over again. And I believe they were actually going through one dealership, and they were pretty much guaranteed what they were going to get for that truck. So it benefited them. But then again, they don't have the miles of roads that we have, so you know, there's a lot of variations there.
Bob, on fiscal year '25, which at this point we've left in here just for the purposes of the conversation, you're comfortable with me going forward and dropping out that column and everything that was slated to be in '25 you're anticipating is set?
Yes,
Okay.
I believe so. And the only thing I saw on here that could possibly change, it's going to depend on how Sam would like to move forward, is for the sidewalks. Because right now we have Seamans Road on there, and that might actually get pushed back a year, I would assume. He'll probably need more money than what we have. We currently have, I believe it's 120,000 for what I call Holman's Corner, which is 114 Newport Main intersection, coming back to Cougar Court. When I got that money, it was fine then, but now that was in the middle of not knowing the water department was going to be tearing the road up, so it kind of got pushed back. So there will be probably money needed for that. But once again, I don't think we're going to be able to do it in 2026, the way things are going with them. So he probably will have to change something on that. That'll be the only change I see on here.
Can I jump in there? Just to add on to that, the new Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee is talking quite a bit about sidewalks and having that conversation about the money that we have in the reserve fund, the money that was appropriated for that purpose. We're talking about maybe even considering, since the vote was specific to say that $120,000 was going to be used from Holman Lane to SAU, perhaps having a vote on changing that language so that perhaps next summer we can use it for Cleveland's down to Squires Lane, because that wasn't part of the water project, so we could work on that next summer. We're talking about switching it up a little bit with sidewalks so we could try to get some immediate, results on that, because it's a hot topic.
And that might, I did suggest that to them, as you know.
Yeah.
And, that probably would work fine for coming down. Just go as far as you can go with it.
Right.
And then see where you're at to start. And then I think it would be a lot cheaper probably on that end. There's things you can do down there that'd be a little different. You probably don't need the curbing, like we do down on this end, so the expense would be a lot less. It'd just be more paving and prep work. So
Yeah.
I think that probably, and that'll be something Sam will be talking to people about, but I think that would be a definite direction. So.
You'll be hearing a lot from us, Sam.
Yeah, go ahead, Charlie. Yep.
So I'm under infrastructure building, that section. The last two line items, buildings, assessment, and facilities management. Can you talk about what that 50,000 is going to get us? And particularly, I'm interested, does it include all our buildings and facilities? And does this then inform or potentially adjust what we are projecting on building expense and building maintenance? And then my second question is the asset management for public works equipment. Have we thought about, is that asset management solely for public works, or are we thinking more broadly about asset management for all the departments in the town?
Okay, the buildings asset management plan, that's in the works right now. And that is going to affect us. As far as how much, I have no idea until the engineers go through everything and compile a list, because they're trained to do that, so they'll come up with something. So I do expect a definite impact to the capital improvement. As far as the asset management plan for equipment, we currently don't take care of fire department equipment and such. The only way we'd be able to probably tie in with fire department and police would be if we send them an email perhaps and say, hey, this just come up on our computer. I see it being pretty complicated where we're different departments, and vehicles for like police go in a different area. Their radios and things of that such, you know, we don't deal with any of that. So I'm not 100% sure this would be something we'd have to look at when it come to that time. Whether they can jump in to that asset management, have access to it, I don't know. We haven't even got that far yet. So I do know on the buildings and facilities one, you can have more than one person go into them. The problem is if you have too many people getting in there, buttons get pushed and things get lost. So you got to kind of control who's in there so things don't get dropped through the cracks somewhere.
And I think I would propose to this committee that we include a recommendation that we consolidate asset management to one place or department for all departments, so nobody's mucking with the software, and there's consistent inputs and there are consistent assessments that are done that help inform both repair, maintenance, equipment purchases, et cetera. To me, the more we can do that with all the departments working together, but have primary responsibility in one place, would make a lot of sense, versus the police are now going to do their thing, the fire department's going to do their thing, and there are individual expenses that will occur in addition to the fact that the synergies and efficiencies that might be gained, and I know it's been a topic, by consolidating our assets and managing them as a whole, has some pros and cons to it. But I think in the future, as we go forward, it makes sense to consider that. In the buildings assessment and facilities management piece, is it all buildings in the town? So like the fire department building and et cetera, all the ones we own
Yes,
and
and
operate?
actually, I've been working with Phil Sherman quite a bit on this, and we're also trying to figure out a way to possibly include the library. We're just not quite sure whether that's more of a separate entity, how this is going to work.
I would encourage us to do that.
Encouragement is only a piece of it.
I understand.
It's complicated because at the same time, we don't do the maintenance on the building, nor do I want to at this point. I think things would have to be adjusted to accommodate personnel to be able to take that on.
Yeah, I think, Bob, to add to what you're saying, I have personally gained an appreciation for the nuances of the Tracy Library on a project there. And that informed me to say, there's the process that you use to determine a project's viability, necessity, and the related costs associated with it and how you evaluate that seems to be pretty sound. And I shouldn't say pretty, very sound. I did not experience that with the library, and their efforts, well intended, I don't feel were effective. And the roof was one example of that. The stone wall was one example of that. And there could be great value if we apply our intelligence and our process for asset management and assessment in that way.
And
And I think that my sense is the committee, the library committee facilities component might be receptive to doing that.
yeah,
But I can't speak for them. I'm not trying to. I just think there's opportunity there.
One of the things that they were working on when Crystal was here, I know they were trying to find, to actually go back to the way it used to be and have a facilities person there, which I think is the most important key for the whole thing to work. If they have an individual that is responsible for that building inside and out, because that building is huge, it's got a lot of moving parts. Even if it's just a part-time individual, however they do it, I don't know, but if they have an individual there that's in the building, that pays attention to what's there, because an asset management plan will not work unless you have people. It's just a program that people actually go in and adjust and change and whatnot, but if we're not in that building every day, we don't know what's going on in it, that makes it more difficult to keep that updated. So that's kind of what I meant by that. So hopefully that if they can go in a direction where they have somebody to assist us, then I don't think it would be a huge problem at all.
And Bob, on the asset management for different departments, I imagine that it would work somewhat similar to the new budget software where, my credentials won't get me into Bob's budget, they'll only get me into my budget. That I would think that we could have, police credentials, fire credentials, so that it may be that you are not responsible for the other entities, but that, you're all feeding into the same system. We can certainly add that to the list of.
And that's the thing we got to work out. We don't really know. I have been in conversation with CIP. The system we've been interested in is called iWorks right now, and it's a simple plan. The town of Sunapee is actually starting to use it for their equipment, so Sam and I actually talked to the road agent over there. So we're kind of curious to see where it's going to go. Once they initiate this thing and get it up and running, it would be kind of interesting for us to go over and say, hey, how's that working? Are you using it for other departments? That's what we're hoping to get out of their experience, or learn from their mistakes.
We'll stick to the Intertown to find out what those were. I think so.
Quick question, not necessarily for Bob, but just looking, obviously the totals that we're talking about here is very substantial over time. But I just noticed, for example, that 2029 way exceeds any other year. How does this inform, the creation of reserve funds and things like that? Is that more on a total budget basis, or?
Right. The budget committee members can probably speak better to that, but this really should inform them how to be setting up the capital reserve so that there may be peaks and valleys in the 10-year, but that the tax rate sees a more level implication from that. That being said, if we have a year that's twice everything else and a year 2033 that's zero, I think that might be something to look at, that maybe you guys could take a peek and see if there's something. It's never going to equal, evenly every year, but it might be something to see if there's one thing that could shift a couple spaces that may at least put something in one year and limit another a little bit.
Can I add to that? When I first took over, that was done on this quite a bit. And I know Dr. Wilson is aware of a lot of that, where things get pushed back. And the problem is, in our department, we just have so much. You start pushing stuff back, and it gets to the point where it creates a pretty good headache, because you end up with about 3 pieces of equipment that now are failing, and there's not much you can do about it, so they end up jumbled. Or the worst case scenario is we end up saying, well, I guess we got to live with it, and hope and pray we can get parts for it, or find out that the maintenance just gets zapped. And that's mainly what happened going back about 5 years when I first took over. There was a lot of equipment that was starting to get older that did get pushed back. And it wasn't my predecessor's fault on that. It's just that's the way it is. You just kind of try to tweak things to the best that you can, currently we have, prime example is our F-550s. I think they might be called 1-tons in here, but we have 3 of them. And what we try to do is rotate them. I tried to stretch them out to 5 years apiece, which means the last truck we keep, it goes to the transfer station for we call it, it's retirement years. Hopefully I'm not going to be treated like this, but anyway, we send that to the transfer station. It's pretty much just plowing their driveway and hauling glass, tin cans, and such. So it's got a pretty easy life. However, the truck had a pretty tough life in the beginning, so one of the things we find, and if you look at the transfer station 1-ton they're running right now, you could probably throw some small cats through the sides of it. It's pretty rusted out. So down the road, Sam's probably going to have to bring that back, and that's where we get that jumbled mess, because we got to bring things back in that we thought we could push out, but Mother Nature has another idea on that. The truck that's going there, we have a new 550 coming. The old one that's headed for the transfer station, we actually had to redo the whole inside of the body. Hasn't even made it to the transfer station yet, and it's already got holes in it. So just to kind of give you an idea, that's what happens when you keep pushing stuff back. And we try our darndest to kind of look at that, and it's very, very difficult with the amount of equipment and trucks, and but we do look at it.
Share an anecdote not related to New London necessarily, but in like 2012, I did a facilities and equipment plan for the town of Orford through the Regional Planning Commission, and the public works director at that point was Charlie Waterbury, who sadly was killed in a fire a few years ago as an Orford Volunteer Fire Department member. But it was right after the recession, and he was struggling, and he said, you know, they gutted our budget for 2 years to respond to the economic downturn, and the 2 years there is going to take us 15 years to catch up. And I thought he was extreme at that point, and now I realize that, you know, that probably is true, that basically cutting all equipment expense and infrastructure investment in those 2 years to get back onto schedule and divide those 2 years over the next 15 and keep it, you know, somewhat even, which I thought was interesting, which I'm sure was probably what Richard faced too. You know, that was a particularly tough time, and then it takes a long time to catch up without having these huge spikes.
And that pretty much reflects on the maintenance line when you start looking. You know, you can see it in black and white. I mean, it's just starts climbing up. I mean, my budget on the maintenance, a lot of that gets skewed because of COVID, but hopefully it's going to start coming back a little bit. Prices aren't coming down a whole heck of a lot, but I'm hoping the maintenance end of it goes away a little bit. Part of that maintenance does come out of road maintenance too, so there's expenses there as well. But
Let me just follow up to that if I could. I think the point that you, Adam and Bob are making are spot on. Would it make sense to consider somehow putting a narrative to the process we're talking about here and the criteria that we use to help us determine capital life, capital needs, capital emergencies? Because I think, to Paul's point, when you look at the number in aggregate on a given year, that's what people look at. They don't really have an appreciation for, there actually is an intelligent process utilized, and it has some basic tenets within it, not just anecdotes, but we really are deliberate about how we think about it and what the pros and cons may be, and ultimately those help inform decision-making to include how we think about capital reserve, how we think about the capital budget in aggregate for a given year and for a multi-10-year period. I just think there's some value in sharing that. How it gets shared, I think, is another consideration.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Charlie. Are there other questions for Bob and Sam? Did you guys have anything else you wanted to add?
Just thank you for letting me come in at 7 in the morning to participate in this one last time.
Just in case you weren't sure retiring was the right decision, right?
We'll still be here for the next couple of months, Bob. You're welcome to join us.
Did you, Karen or Rich, did you guys have questions? Yeah. It's going to be a rare thing.
Anything else from committee members as far as Public Works before I sort of jump into process more highly?
I would just add a historical note, not that historical, but I remember talking to Bob 3 or 4 years ago where we talked about the asset management thing, and I think that really, hopefully Sam benefits from that, you know, data is data, and thank God we've had Bob because, you know, when you talk to him, you learned everything that we learned today about these things. But it will be nice when that's implemented to have the data to look at in terms of maintenance and all the other costs that go into it. So I'm glad we're moving forward with that.
Can I touch on the asset management just a little bit? So wastewater has an asset management plan right now. We started in 2019, and I can tell you it's instrumental for wastewater. We use it every single day. I look in the book, and we're using a program every day to like data log and all that, and it is phenomenal. I've gone to numerous other towns and talked with them that don't have it, and I don't know how they do it without it at this point. So the asset management, you know, for doing it since 2019 has been phenomenal, just because there's even things that you don't think about that you go and look at it and you look at the plan for the future and you go, oh wow, yeah, didn't even, you know, didn't consider that part of it because wastewater is hard because so much of it is underground so you don't see it, but it has been really, really good. And so to think about it for buildings and then for equipment as well, I think would be great, especially the equipment, and buildings are a huge part. I think, what they say, 31 buildings that the town owns, so that's a lot for one person to try to think, oh, that needs a roof, or oh, that's going to need an AC. So having that, you know, in paper laid out and the correct people that designed it and built it, and then us able to continue to carry it would be instrumental for sure. So
So Sam, that's like the idea of when you said you look at the system and you come up with things you wouldn't have thought of, is that it? Just because there's so many moving parts, it just reminds you that like, oh yeah, town office needs a new roof, or...
yeah, exactly. Yep, for wastewater, it's that way. I sometimes, you know, valves, backflow preventers, pumps, things like that. Just all these little components that you don't think about because we're looking at it on a daily. You know, our pump control panels, it's working every day, but I have a pump control panel that has over 40,000 hours on it that was installed in the 80s. And I don't necessarily think, oh, that needs to be replaced until I look at my asset management and go, wow, that's almost 50 years old and has been running 24/7, 365 since 82 or something. And it's like, yeah, okay, that's going to get replaced, you know? So, it makes it a little bit more easier to swallow. You know, it's like, it's more tolerable. It's like, okay, so.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and they put a number to it, even in the future, which is nice. You know, it's still throwing a dart at a board, but it's something. You know, it's better than what we can do because they collected that data from all these other towns and can compare it. So I think it's really great.
So what's the timeline on that asset management program right now? You said you're waiting for engineers to do their job, then they'll create the program?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the way it works?
Yep.
When do you think it's going to be up and running for you?
That might be better. I'm kind of fresh into the buildings one, so I'll let Bob touch on that. Phil Sherman might know better with
Sorry,
him.
I got a text message in the middle of that.
I was asking for the timeline on that asset management program. When it will be up and running, do you think? For the buildings?
For the buildings, it's still in the works, so I'm going to come to the board, actually. We're in the process of doing a memo, because we pretty much made a decision with the plan that we want to go with. Ironically, it's the cheapest one. But,
Good to hear.
it seemed to be the right fit. Mm-hmm. So the problem is going to be how long will it take to collect all the data and then get it into the program. So my best guesstimate would be probably next year about this time we'll start seeing numbers show up. That's my hope. That's the one thing that I've been trying to get done before I leave.
Yeah.
And along with about 50 other projects, but but that one's been the one that I've been trying to get as close as I can, so give Sam a little breathing room to learn his position. But I'm hoping next year. Before this time would be nice.
Yeah.
But it all depends on the final decision on who's going to compile all the information for us. So we're working on that.
So would it make sense to move, that's a $40,000 expenditure, would it make sense to move that to 2026 from the 2028?
So that was
Sure, or
actually
no?
my idea to move it out to the 2028, only because with the buildings and facilities, I was nervous about getting everything under my feet and kind of understanding that before we added another level of complexity to it. That was my only concern, just being new to a position once Bob's gone, and kind of having the buildings asset management. So that was my idea, and I'll take responsibility for it. But as far as the equipment goes, the equipment is a little bit easier to track because, you know, it's right in front of us. We're using it on the daily basis, and we kind of see what it's costing us all the time. And through our own process and procedure, we kind of look at everything all the time and have an open conversation about it. So I think the asset management for the equipment isn't as pertinent probably as the buildings. And once we get, from what we've been talking with Phil Sherman and stuff and understanding that iWorks program as well, we may be able to add to the asset management ourselves once it's kind of started and established. If we can get comfortable and, like, you know, understand the program enough, we can look in it, put our own data into it, and then have it kind of say, okay, this is the result of that. And then the other thing you always have is comparing ourselves to other towns, you know, see what other towns are doing as far as equipment, how long they're letting trucks go, how long they're getting equipment, you know, it's all the same pieces of equipment, it's just different people using it. And that does make a big difference sometimes, but for the most part, a piece of equipment's only good for so long. So we have all these other places to compare it as well. So I don't get overly intimidated by the equipment, but.
I'd like to add to that when I get a chance to. As far as moving it, I would feel more comfortable leaving it right where it is, because if, in fact, you know, this asset management plan we're looking at, you know, once we get talking to Sunapee and everything else, you know, spot on to what Sam just said, it might be that, you know, that gets totally wiped out of the CIP because it might be an in-house expense that's not extravagant. I'm not sure what the program to add that piece on would be just to do the program. We'd have to research that. But I think it would be a benefit to step back and just get used to the first one, and then if in fact Sam can do it on his own, because the equipment is a lot more simple. We can just go around and, you know, punch in a VIN number or whatever it may be, the year and model, and then go from there. So I think it's wise.
Yeah, cool, thank you. I know we have to set the schedule, so I don't want to take up too much time, but just very quickly, I can't remember what type of heating system is in town office. You mentioned that. Do you know what system that would be replaced with?
Repeat that?
The heating system in town office?
The heating system, as
Yeah.
far as,
What's the, I just forget what type of system it is.
it's a propane forced hot air.
Okay, that's what I was trying to remember. And then you also mentioned, thanks for that. And then you also mentioned generators. Have you guys looked at, it's probably still early, so I imagine not, but at other options besides like batteries and things like that versus generators?
We have not. The biggest concern I'd have for like the police station, well, police and fire, probably wouldn't be an issue with the town office. But, you know, during '98, that ice storm, when that hit, you know, things were down. That's where those generators came from. It was because of '98, and that's when they were first installed, shortly after that. if you're down for an extended period of time, I'd be concerned about whether they'd be able to keep going, where fuel, we can get that, excuse me, and if we had to truck it in from out of town or hire a company to come in and fill the units, which we've done before in emergency situations.
Yep.
I think I'd feel more comfortable with
That
the
makes
fact
sense. Yep, that makes total sense. I was just curious.
Yep.
And the upstairs at the town office is on heat pump. So at least that has the benefit of the solar panels.
Cool. Any other questions or comments?
Okay to talk about schedule and
Yeah,
logistics?
yeah,
Okay.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
So it sounds like Friday mornings may be a good time for folks. Is that generally okay? So I talked to Chief Cobb, and she thinks hitting another morning before her police subcommittee would be great for hers, and she could just, block off the morning. She thinks she can be ready for 2 weeks from today, if that works for folks, that we could schedule police department on August 2nd, also do 7 a.m. And then for subsequent departments, you're out of town on the 2nd? Are you okay with, if we, okay. 8. Thanks, guys.
Likewise. Thank you.
And Tim, if you're out of town and want to zoom in, we could maybe accommodate that. Hopefully it'll go well in this next meeting because the system has been finicky, but keep that in mind if you'd like to. So if we do August 2nd, 7 a.m. for the police department, and then do the 9th and 16th work for folks as well if I reach out to the other departments and try to pigeonhole them into the times that work for them? Okay. No, I will see what works for different department heads and sort of squeeze them in when they can. In the last few years, for folks like conservation and energy, we've just asked them to submit, an email. We don't necessarily need a whole meeting. Do folks still feel that way, or they've had very small asks, like a one line item? Energy might this year? Okay. Yeah, I mean, every year they only submit the one reoccurring $500,000 for land, but I can talk to Bob, and so maybe it's. I think they're always talking. We'll see what they say, and maybe it's that we can. Recycling wouldn't, but I do plan to talk to Jerry Coogan to see if there's anything from waste reduction. Last year, they were only, 3 months into meeting, and they weren't ready to make any ask, but that could be a possibility this year. And so maybe it's that we have a meeting after the 8th and the 16th that's sort of the catch-all for the randoms, that maybe they get, 15 minutes and not an hour, and we can sort of bump through those smaller budgets. The hope would be, let's see, that by, remind me when the selectmen are doing their budget day. That's the last week in October. Okay, so working back from that, our goal, is that the 25th, BB? Okay, so then our goal would be to have the CIP adopted at the planning board no later than October 22nd. It'd be really great if it was October 8th, but the reality is that it would be done a couple weeks before the 22nd to advertise the public hearing. So, even if it wasn't officially adopted until 3 days before, the selectmen would have the draft, and I wouldn't anticipate major changes at the planning board anyways. So that's what we're sort of targeting. So if we can get through the majority of our department level meetings in August. That gives us September to just have the sort of work sessions among this committee to, put things together. I think last year there were 2 work sessions. So I think it's a pretty doable timeline. Thanks to Bob's departure, we're starting a month early this year, which the department heads have been mostly okay with, but, bumping up budget season by a month for them, it's always interesting, but, and I don't know, in the past, sometimes we've had August vacation issues with scheduling folks, so we'll see what exists, but I would say if we mark out those 3 dates for 7 a.m., I'll be in touch and let you know if there's one that we don't have anyone signing up for.
Can you just repeat them one more time? The dates?
Yep, so it's Friday the 2nd, Friday the 9th, and Friday the 16th.
Okay, just wanted to double check.
Yep.
Thanks.
I would just suggest, Adam, that even if there are vacations, that they get a spreadsheet in so that there won't be a lot of surprises as they get pushed back.
Yep. And we'll definitely, even if they're on vacation, we'll find a time to meet with them in person so that we can have the conversations. All right.
What about the library?
The library will be one of the groups that we reach out to. Obviously, Richard is 10 days into his tenure, so I don't know exactly what that will look like. I would guess that the trustees will have some projects that they are aware of that they'll ask him to put in, but I wouldn't be surprised if theirs looks very similar to last year's until he has a little bit of time under his belt. I have not met him yet. I don't know if you have, BB, but. Okay.
Cool. Any questions, comments? Anybody?
We finished with 2 minutes to spare. That's efficiency, folks.
Made it. Yes, we will try to do our best to hold these meetings. We had to today, but to hold these meetings to an hour, so.
Yep. Any of the ones on the 1st and the 3rd, we will definitely have to hold to an hour. The one on the 9th, if I can get 2 or 3 departments, maybe we might stretch that to 90 minutes if that's okay, because there's not a police committee that morning, so we wouldn't be under the same constraint.
That makes sense. Yeah, we'd have a little more time to work through it. But yeah, generally we'll try to keep them short. Okay, any other questions, comments? Karen, anything? Yep, okay.
Are we aiming for a memo similar to?
I would say to be determined, depending on what the software looks like. I really don't know what the output on that end looks like yet. If you put in individual narrative with each department and it spits out, a sheet for that. Lynn and I, she's almost ready to be able to at least show me what a mock module looks like there. So hopefully, I think before the 2nd, I should have a better idea with that. She did start meeting with some of the departments this week to show them what the budgeting side looks like. She started with some of the larger departments like the police department, so I'm not in the lineup quite yet with the smallest department budget, but but hopefully I'll know more.
Great. Well, thanks everybody. Appreciate it.